All right, in this video, we're going to learn how to use DOM manipulation to generate something like this purely in JavaScript. In our HTML, this is the only thing we have with the ID rows container. Okay, so how can we do something like this that when we click on it, it alerts us of the text content? Well, we're going to have this function create any element, we give it a name and how many of those elements we want, and it will append that to our container div. Okay, so I can do const ARR is equal to new array. I'm going to use the array constructor once again. Well, how many? Just going to come from the argument. This gives us a sparse array, remember, that we need to fill. But now we can just fill it with name. And then we can map. I'm going to use the value and the index also. So what do we want each of our text content to say? Well, we want it to say the name that it currently has, right? Which is now in val because we're mapping. Val plus, let's say we want row 1, row 2, row 3. We don't want row index 0 though. So can we do val plus idx plus 1? And then let's console.log arr. Oh, okay, our code works, but our name's kind of weird. Look, div01. That's because of string concatenation. Look, div is a string, that's val, plus 0, that's how we got div0. And then plus 1 converts this to a string. One way to solve this, square brackets to the rescue. See, this will now evaluate first. But did you know that you can also do this and we'll get the same thing? So whenever you use the plus plus sign on the left of a number, since JavaScript evaluates left to right, it will increase whatever's on the right first and then returns that as the value in whatever equation it's doing. Like in this case, it's doing val. So let's say val is 0, it'll say 0 plus, increase the next number, 1. And then it returns 0 plus 1. So we get 1. If we put it on the right, we put it on the right, we get 0. Because now it says 0 plus, the index is 0. So div 0. And then internally, it increases the index by 1, which does not help us at all. Okay, so now that we have that, this is when a while loop is useful. So I'm going to use while, and then I'm going to check as long as this array has a length, we're going to run this loop. And that's going to lead us to an infinity loop because we're not mutating this array yet. And then I'm going to mutate it using the .shift. And let's see how we can implement this. I can do while ar.length. And now my console on the right is going to have an infinite loop. Okay. Now, as it's looping, I'm going to do const new row is equal to document.create element with the name of whatever they pass in. And then I can do new row that's set attribute since I gave it a class in my CSS class, and I'll call this row. And now, what's the new row dot text content gonna be? Well, remember we wanted to say button or div or p, and then the index plus 1, right? Right now, all of that is inside this array. So we can do arr.shift. And when you do .shift, it mutates this array. It cuts off the first index and returns its value. So now our text content is set to that value, and we're cutting the length of this array. That way, this while loop does not run forever on us. And then we can just do container.append child, passing in new row. Right? And then we can return our ARR. And then when we get out of this infinite loop, let's paste it over here. Cool. Now we see these. Okay, how can we do event listeners here? Well, since we set all of the classes to row, we can do const all rows is document.query selector all. And I'm going to select everything with the class of row. And then I can do all rows dot for each. Remember, this is an HTML list, so you have to do for each, not map. For each, and then each tag, I can do tag dot add event listener, click, and then let's do an arrow function here. It's just console.log e.target.text content. Okay. Instead of console.log, let's do alert so we don't have to go to the console. Cool. Div 4, div 2. Okay. Knowing what we know about event bubbling, we should realize that we don't need to do any of this. Doing a for each loop is actually very computationally expensive. That's actually just doing a for loop underneath the hood. Okay? And then we're using a lot of memory because we're adding each event listener on each tag, okay? When we can just do that on the parent. So we don't even need to do any of this. We can do container.add event listener. Click. And then I can do the alert.e.target.text content. Okay. See, it still works. Cool, right? So that is taking advantage of event bubbling. And this while loop is taking advantage of our array mutation method as a guard clause. Now, talking about guard clauses, this isn't going to work unless the how many is greater than 0. So we actually need a guard clause. If how many is less than 1, yes, alert must be positive integer. Okay. And then let's try to call it with 0. See, we get that. And this is also error handling. This is synchronous error handling, unlike fetch, but it's also error handling.